Hey, welcome back. This is section 3, working safely at height in construction workplace. So in this specific area, we will be looking at what does working at height mean? What regulations cover working at height? The employer and employee's responsibilities when working is to be carried out at height. Possible hazards and risks when working at height. How to control hazards and risks when working at height. Working on flat roofs and internal voids. So which of these do you think is classed as working at height? Is it the two gentlemen there standing on the side, looking at the looking at the digger? Is it those guys on that moving platform? Are they classed as working at height? Those ladders about 3 or 4 foot in the air, is that classed as working at height? The answer is they all are. Every single one of those people are working at height. So the specific health and safety regulation which covers any work carried out at height is the Working at Height Regulations 2005. This explains the actions you need to take when carrying out any work which is classed as working at height. So what is classed as working at height? Working at height refers to any place where work is to be carried out, and if there were no safety precautions in place, you could fall a distance which could possibly cause you personal injury. So there isn't a specific measurement. It simply states that if you're working at a height, that if there was no safety precautions in place and you fell, would you hurt yourself? This includes working areas such as ladders, step ladders, or hop-ups. Working on a flat roof. Working on any access equipment. Working on a fragile roof area. Working next to a hole or trench where you could fall through an opening. They are all classed as working at height. Employer responsibilities relating to working at height. So the employer needs to make sure that when any work is to be carried out at height, that it is planned properly so it's carried out safely. Supervised by experienced people. Any working at height is carried out by competent workers. Carried out using the correct type of access equipment. A risk assessment is carried out and control measures are put into place. The employer needs to do what they can to prevent anyone from falling. So if you look at the image there on the left hand side, this guy has a harness. He's attached at 2 points, so he's clipped it to the side and at the rebar at the top there as well. He's also got safety glasses on, gloves and a hard hat, and wearing a high vis jacket there as well. Employee responsibilities when working at height. As an employee, when working at height, you are responsible for using any safety equipment provided by your employer safely. So if they provided with a harness, as we can see in the picture there, you must wear it. If it says in the risk assessment and the method statement that to carry out that job safely, you must wear a harness, therefore you must be wearing it. Using the information gained from training and instructions to use safety equipment correctly. To follow all risk assessments and method statements. Reporting any safety hazards or unsafe working conditions to the appropriate person. So if we think about if we're working at height, things like the weather could have an impact. So if all of a sudden it starts to get windy or that roof that you're working on has become slippy because it's raining, then it will be a good idea to notify your site supervisor or your site manager, because it could potentially mean that that surface is now unsafe to work on. So hazards and risks when working at height. So there are different hazards and risks that are specific to different types of work carried out at height and also the location they are carried out in. So a quick recap. Remember, a hazard is something with a potential to cause harm. And a risk is how bad a person could be injured and the chance of the hazard causing an injury. So hazards and risks when working with a ladder. So the hazards could be the ladder not being placed on a firm, even ground. The ladder is not secured at the top or at the bottom. Overreaching on either side. Overreaching means if you are actually on the ladder and you're trying to reach for something that's just out of your grasp. Okay, that's overreaching. Using a defective ladder. So is it the case that the rungs on the ladder are made out of wood and they're starting to corrode a little bit? Using a ladder in high winds. Using near electric cables. Using tools and equipment. So if you're working at height and you're using tools and equipment, obviously the hazards are that they could either fall out of your tool belt, or the case they could fall out of your hand and they could strike somebody, a pedestrian that's underneath, or a colleague who's underneath as well. Those risks, the ladder falling or sliding if it's not on uneven ground. Being blown from the ladder if it's windy outside. Falling from the ladder through overstretching. So if you are overreaching on either side, you could fall from the ladder from overstretching. Dropping tools and equipment is the risk of using tools at a height. The ladder's breaking if the rungs or the stiles are cracked. So the control measures you could put into place to make sure that those ladders are safe to use. Use at a correct angle. Do not overstretch. Secure it where necessary. So use the ties at the base and at the top as well. Use standoffs. It would be a good idea to do some research and find out what the actual correct angle is for using a ladder. It can come up in an exam situation, specifically in the CSCS test. Use access for scaffold platform needs to be at least 1 meter past the platform. Mobile towers. So mobile towers are lightweight, mobile working platform. Hazards when using these include fixing their harness to the tower, being erected by untrained people, used on soft, uneven ground, not using outriggers when required. Outriggers are the legs that stick out from either side of the platform to give it extra stability. Not applying brakes when working on them. Mobile towers, as you can see from the right hand side there, they look like scaffolding, but obviously they can be moved about. They're on caster wheels with brakes applied to them. So think about the wheels that you might see on a shopping trolley or on a child's pushchair. They'll have brakes on to stop them from moving. If you haven't applied those brakes and now you're working at height, that's hazardous. Overloading the working platform. So those platforms would be suitable for potential 1 or 2 people at a time. See the guidelines when you're erecting the scaffold, how many it can take and the weight it can take. If you overload that, it's going to start becoming hazardous. Not using kick or toe boards. So kick and toe boards, as you see from the image there, that's the black bit that you'll see around where the feet of the 2 people that are working there. That means that those kick and toe boards will stop any tools rolling off the side and potentially striking somebody underneath. Pulling the tower when moving rather than pushing. Not checking the tower and components before use. Using the tower in strong winds. And moving towers over 4 meters can tip them over. Not using the correct methods to access the working platform. And also using near overhead cables. So those risks. Tower collapsing because it was erected by people who were not competent. Items falling from the working platform as there were no toe or kickboards. The tower's fallen over when being moved incorrectly. The tower toppling over as no outriggers were being used to give a firm support at the base. The person falling off when climbing up the tower on the outside and not using the correct method. Person falling from top with harness fixed to the tower may pull the tower over with them. Electric shock if tower using the electric cables. Someone falling from the working platform if it's moved while they're on it. And the tower moving or falling over due to being used on soft sloping ground and the brakes not being on. So the safety precautions when using the mobile tower. All staff need to be trained and competent Use mobile towers safely. All working platforms need to be enclosed with toe boards to prevent materials and toes falling. Outriggers to be used as base to increase stability, as stated by the manufacturer. Again, those outriggers are those legs that stick from either side of the mobile tower to give that extra stability. Only climb the tower using the specified method. So as you can see, the guy in the picture there is using the ladders on the inside of the tower, not on the outside of the tower. Take precautions when working near power cables, such as closing them down. So if you're working closer cables above you, it might be a good idea to have that area specifically isolated so you don't get struck by electricity. Only use on firm, even ground. Work on the platform with all 4 brakes applied. And when moving the tower, it is safer to push it than it is to pull it. Independent scaffolding is built with tubes and scaffold boards and erected by competent licensed scaffolders. So there is specific training that can take place and you can complete, called your PASMA training. And only those who have got PASMA certificates are able to put up scaffolding. But common hazards would include not being built by a competent person, the material stacked dangerously or too heavy or left untidy on work platforms. So if you're working at height and you've got tools or equipment stacked, so whether it's toe boards stacked or different kinds of equipment stacked up at height, they can tip over the side. It's too heavy for that specific scaffolding. It's left untidy, so it can cause slips, trips and falls. Workers adjusting scaffolding and removing toe boards, poles or netting is going to be quite hazardous. Users not keeping tools and equipment safe. Other people working on the scaffolding are going to be hazards. So those specific risks: the scaffold collapsing if important parts are removed or not used. Materials or equipment falling from scaffold and hitting somebody. A person falling from scaffold if boards or guardrails are removed. A person falling if they're not using the correct PPE. So as identified earlier, the likelihood is that you will be harnessed on, you will be attached to the scaffolding. So if you do fall over the side, you're harnessed on and you'll only fall a short distance rather to hit the ground. So control measures when it comes to independent scaffolding. All people are trained to work on scaffolds. Scaffolds are only erected by competent scaffolders. All workers are scaffolded to wear the required PPE. Materials and equipment to be stored safely on working platforms, and netting and guards to be used. Scaffold is only accessed using methods provided. We have mobile elevated working platforms, also can be abbreviated to MUPs. They can be in subcategories, for example, the cherry picker, the boom lift, and the scissor lift. Working on fragile roofs. That will include slate and tiles, glass roofs, rotten chipboards under felt, metal sheets that have rusted, fibre cement sheets. So safe working on fragile roofs. Avoid if at all possible. So in other words, could you use a boom lift? Could you use a cherry picker? So rather than stepping onto the roof, can we use a MUP to access that roof that's going to be more stable and more secure? Can the work be carried out from inside? Can we use crawling boards? So wider areas, a piece of wood that you can put on top of the roof that would distribute your weight across a bigger surface area to make it a little bit safer. As I've just mentioned, using a MUP to gain access. Use of edge protection and PPE. So edge protection could be at the edge of the roof where the guttering would be. You could put a plank of wood that would stop anything or anyone rolling off the side of the roof. PPE, hard hats, gloves, goggles, harnesses. All workers to be carried out by competent people. So control measures when working on a roof. Safety netting. So the netting could be there to catch people, or be there to catch equipment, could be there to catch tools from striking somebody beneath them. Edge protection, as I mentioned before, the example I gave was wood, or we could have steel fencing around the edge of the roof to stop anybody or anything from falling off the side. Harnesses, lanyards, and access equipment should all be used when working at height, specifically on a roof. Internal voids. In construction, an internal void could be a lift shaft, a service shaft. A void is any area which can be a tight space that stretches from the top of the ground floor of a building under construction. The biggest risk is falling down them. So safety precautions. All exposed entrances to be fenced off. Anyone working in a void needs training. All workers to wear harness and fall arrest equipment. Risk assessments and method statements are to be followed. So in those risk assessments and in those method statements, it'll identify all the risks, all the hazards, and the control measures in place for those who are going to be working in and around the void. So therefore, control measures would be harnesses, fall arrest systems. Only trained people who are able to work in voids should be working in the void. Session summary. In the summary, we have covered what is meant by the term working at height. Yours and the employee's responsibilities when working at height is required. Type of access equipment and their hazards and risks. Working on roofs and in building voids. And that is the end of section 3.